Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I'm your host, Gary Cinderbrandt. Today we're joined by Noa Ronen. Noa's in the executive coaching space, but all the assumptions I made prior to getting to know her a little bit were just dead wrong. So I'm really interested in the story because Noa seems to gravitate toward areas where I would say conflict is probably a foregone conclusion. And that's in the area of tech, especially as we're in a world right now where what was brand new and breakthrough yesterday is old news by tomorrow. So change has got to be something you deal with on a regular basis. Noa, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. How did you get to this executive coaching skill that you clearly have with a focus on technology at a corporate or group level? Take me through that. What happened?
So first, just thank you for having me, and let's see where the conversation will take us. So it's interesting. I think tech found me, or maybe it was always around me. My father brought a Commodore 64 home when, before everyone used to have those computers. And my story started actually in the Israeli army. In Israel, everyone has to go to the army, and I worked with the officers in the Navy on their executive stance. How do they educate their soldiers because the belief is that when you are the one educating your people as the leader, people will follow you in any situation. And in the army and Navy and everywhere, it's the life and death situations that people trust their leaders. So the belief is that the officer is not just there to take them in those life and death situations, but in any situation to be a leader. And my role was to be next to them rather than be the trainer at the front. And when you think about it, that was almost 30 years ago, when now it's only gets into the corporate America of the leader should be the one developing and growing their people. So that was my school, wonderful school. And it took me on career of HR, talent development, change management. And when we think now about AI, I worked with communication companies, big companies in Israel, when they started moving from paper to technologies. So it's exactly what we see now. We saw then with the web when they start bringing the ERPs like SAP and Oracle to be part of the processes and computerize them. And people were afraid from the same thing that we see right now with AI, the same fear. I was very, very young to work with executives, see how they think, what they care about, and realize that I have that command to speak with them at the kind of like in my early 20s, sitting there in the room and understand how they think, what they care about, and also build trust from the human side with people that were afraid that they're going to be laid off because of technology. So my journey kept taking me from leading processes of change to becoming the one going, moving from that theory and the doing to experiencing change on myself. When my husband received an opportunity for us to move to New York City with 2 little kids for a job opportunity. And that was a big thing for me, moving from one country to another. You don't realize the impact on your life when you do that. I was in my 30s. I already had a career, and you get into a new country for 2-3 years of experience. 20 years after, I'm still here a citizen of the US. My kids are totally Americans. They're after college. One of them went back to New York City. We live now in Raleigh. But that changed, taught me compassion and understanding what does it mean from the human side when you are going through change and the grief you experience when you are going through any change, whether if it's positive or not so positive. We have the same experience. So just for example, when I have for the first time a baby as a mother, there is grief there of who is the person I am right now, because I used to be a different person and now I'm a new being, and I need to redefine myself in this new change. And when you relocate from one country to another, you grieve the person you were before, and suddenly there is a new reality for you, and you lose your community, and that can even happen when you move from one neighborhood to another. So there were a lot of things that suddenly were deeper for me, and I started blogging about them. Just like podcasting today, then blogging was really a hit, and I started a blog about my transition, and people really like that. And long story short, there is a week that I get phone calls from different women that read my blog, and they asked me, how did you do that? Can you coach me? And that was almost 20 years ago. That no one, when you said that you're a coach, everyone thought that you are coaching a sports team. So what is that word? I know consulting, I know training, but what's that word coaching? Is that a scam? But I was curious why everyone is calling me at the same week, and I was pretty lost, not happy in my life, frustrated, can't figure out what I'm going to do with my career. Where am I going? Are we going back? Are we staying here? And then there is this calling, and I was curious. And long story short, I took a course that brought me into a year of learning, coaching inside and out, become certified. And that's how my path started. That brought me into working with people like me, then working with leaders that moved to the US from other cultures and felt lost leading in the US culture, and then working with global companies, with leaders and people, and then decided to take a moment to go and work inside the American healthcare company as an executive coach, because I felt I was so distant for so long from being inside company that I went inside. And again, the tech people reached out to me and said, we don't want theory. We don't have the time for that. Can you play with us? So we played together. And when I left that company, I realized that it's always the tech people that we play together and enjoy working together. And that I want to take everything that I have learned and taking into more of a heart place, because I felt what's missing was the human connection. And how do we create meaningful conversations using peer-to-peer approach? And that's
I want to go back a little bit, if I may.
life.
Sorry to interrupt. You made a comment early on about your time in the IDF, which is compulsory in Israel.
Yeah.
And you made a statement along the lines of the officer or the leader of the unit was the one doing the training of the unit, which caused the unit members to want to follow him because he was the one that trained them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were right next to him, helping him to figure out how to communicate more effectively with the unit.
Yeah. So rather than, mostly when you see trainers, we are about being at the front, right? We want the front seat. And the invitation was, no, you be next to the leader, you be even at the back. Let them be the leaders, even when they need to train and educate and find their skills to grow and develop their people. And I think it's wonderful because you remove your ego and you really empower another person to show up as a leader. And it also teach you a lot, right? About.
Is it fair to say then that trainers would be natural leaders, but leaders would not necessarily be natural trainers?
That's beautiful, beautifully said. And I think today, and that's something that I saw when I was inside the company and influenced that, is that it's time for the trainers to remove themselves and how you create space for others to show up, that they need to do the work, and you should be the facilitator or the one empowering others how to lead. So that's something that when I came with the idea of peer-to-peer, it was because, and I'm sorry to all my trainer friends, because I come from training, but I believe that training is a dead horse. And we need a different way to develop and grow people. And it's we can go into a philosophical conversation.
No, listen,
Universities, how we
I couldn't agree more. When I was developing as in wealth management with Merrill Lynch very early on, I kind of made the mistake of complaining about how bad I thought the training was because it had nothing to do with what I did on a daily basis. And a very senior executive challenged me to do better. So, dopey guy that I am, I wrote a training program and it ended up running for 12 years at Merrill Lynch.
Wow.
Traveled, trained a lot of people. But the number one feedback we would get would be, we want to come listen because this is one of our peers. He does exactly what we do. And I was just pretty good at explaining it and breaking it down, but I never considered myself a trainer. The trainers were the people that didn't quite make it in the role. It's like learning how to fly from a pilot that's never been off the ground. They can tell you all the theory, but unless they're out there actually doing it. So using a peer-to-peer method to me is by far the most effective method.
Exactly.
Possibly. And you empower people with leadership. And the other thing I noticed, and I'm wondering if you see the same thing, when you're training in a peer-to-peer manner, the person who is communicating, they have to get better all the time. They consistently have to know their stuff. They can't kind of phone it in. Have you found that as well? That when your peers are doing training, they feel compelled to get better?
So I will just take it to what I'm doing now because it's really connected. And the data shows that people learn better from peers than from teachers. And as you say, it's real conversation. The things that I create now with tech companies or whoever I work with, I call it the peer-to-peer power or peer-to-peer leadership, is really real play, not role play. No one cares about case scenarios. No one cares about role play. I fall asleep when I get those exercises. I'm a horrible participant, I have to say. So I want to see something as you did 12 years ago. And there are people that get it. The leaders, the CEOs that you sit with, they say, I don't want that. I don't want to spend 3 days sitting with a trainer and that I waste my people time and we don't get anything. I want something that works. And the peer-to-peer works because you remember more when you talk about your work challenges. And the frame should be a way that people feel safe to share. And that's my skill. I think that's where the professionals come into place, is how to create that safe space that people want to do that. But when you know how to create that safe space for people, people teach each other and they never want to stop talking with each other. And you probably saw that when you did
You're
that.
absolutely correct. I'm thinking about all these past experiences. And I didn't ever think I was of myself as a teacher. I just thought I'd go into a room of 50 people. Initially, didn't want to be there. And 6 hours later, I'd have 50 new best friends because we all spoke the same language. And it wasn't like I'm right and you're wrong. It was like, here's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah,
And you start to
exactly.
bring out what everybody's doing. And what's also interesting, and I think you alluded to it, is the power of learning through stories, learning through real experience, as
Right.
opposed to studying a book or interviewing a bunch of people and saying, here's what I found out from talking to a bunch of people. McKinsey's a good example of that, one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. They'll do a deep dive into a particular industry. And the purpose of those consultants, they just study the industry, but they've never worked in the industry.
Exactly.
So they'll get some things right from the outside, but on the inside, you're just going to go, oh, that is so wrong. But then the
Yeah.
people they give it to who make decisions above the people that really need to change, well, we paid McKinsey a lot of money, so we're going to do what they say. Well, it didn't work the last 8 times they told you. Why would it work now?
Yeah.
So it's amazing because you do have this disconnect sometimes in the senior leadership.
Yeah, and I have to say, part of the reason that I decided to go inside that healthcare company was because I felt I was distant and working. I always work with, I'm an executive coach, but I always make sure to work with all variety of people in companies because I want to hear the individual contributor. I want to hear the manager, not to lose the compassion or understanding of what's happening in different layers of organizations. But when you're inside and you get the engagement, the employee engagement, and you see that, as you know, for me, for example, when I write a bit differently. It was before the AI that you can tell ChatGPT, write your stuff in one way or another. So suddenly I didn't feel safe because I said, oh, they will know that Noah wrote that. So suddenly, what does it mean to feel safe in a company was different for me. What does it mean? Trust, collaboration, working with executives inside the company and see things from the inside and hear people from the inside, and then becoming part of the strategy team that works on talent was very interesting, and see what the business wants. So that was a very important thing for me, to bring myself back and understand, and not being that observer that consultants and coaches like to be. And I think it's wonderful. And it's important that we have those external people that can work. And I do want to come back for a moment if that's okay, to your last question that I don't think I answered fully. And I think the second thing that happens when peers teach peers is that their skills become better. So even I heard that your story that you learned how to be a pilot. The person next to you that was also the pilot learned from you how to be a better pilot. And as a mentor coach, when I listen to recording, I'm a master coach. So I worked very, very hard to get to that level, and I mentor coaches. And I listen to a lot of recordings, and that inspires me to never lose the mastery of, and you're not always a master coach, but when we do peer-to-peer and we learn from each other, and we grow together, and we build better skills of listening, better skills of communication and feedback, and we stay friends beyond because we talked about real stuff. So now I want to keep talking with Gary outside that learning. And that's for me the real ripple effect that I'm creating, those peer-to-peer, because I want to keep the conversation with that person. And then that person helps me with resources and connections. And it just builds this amazing ripple effect that is starting to happen in the company. And I have to tell you, I don't teach them active listening. I don't teach them powerful questions and all the coaching skills that some organizations spend days to teach their people. In 7 minutes, they start peer-to-peer experience, and they listen and they ask questions, and then they go and they use that in sales conversations, and they use that when they sit with their direct reports. They learn to listen. They learn to ask questions rather than giving answers all the time. So in a lot of different layers, they build skills without teaching them skills. And I think that's the magic.
Walk me through one of your later engagements. You're called into a company. You do what? First thing you do is talk to the people that are bringing you in about what they want to accomplish.
Yeah.
What does your investigation uncover sometimes? Is it often what the senior leadership thinks it is? Walk me through, let's call it a problem set and a solution.
Yeah, so it's definitely, as you can understand, not a cookie cutter. I really need to sit and listen to, mostly it will be the leader or the HR. So it can be a CEO, it can be a leader of a department, and they will come and say, what's the pain? And I think what's wonderful for me as a person that also sales, what I do is that as a coach, I know how to listen and ask questions. And today I'm in the answer, I'm the one responding, but mostly I will be the one listening really well and really understanding where they come from. And, sometimes it seems so simplified, but then they say, there was a merger and acquisition, or I will ask what change happened in the past few months to understand if there was a restructure or like merger and acquisition or whatever, because every story of a company is so different and can impact how we approach it. So if there was a merger and acquisition, I need to talk with the leader that bought the company and see what they care about. It's not even anymore about the leader that brought me into the conversation. So it can be very complicated, if it makes sense, to understand really what is the need. And after I talk with the leader, I always say, well, now I need to go and talk with your people. And sometimes it will be one-on-ones, and sometimes it will be a focus group. We meet together and I ask, what do we need to do to take the team from good to great? I never talk about problems. I ask them where you are today, how you would like to take yourself from good to great.
How do they
And
measure success? How do you quantify? Because I know
yeah,
in
and that's
big
a hard.
corporate, big companies, they have a hard time because there's no, what you do doesn't show up in the P column. It's always in the expense column.
Yeah.
So how do they judge? How do you help them judge success when you're there?
Yeah, so just learned this from Gemini that I'm pretty much a coach consultant. So it's a coach and consultant, right? It's a cool word. So what I do is I bring some parameters for, depends if they say we want to build communication skills, trust, collaboration, we work in silos. That's mostly where I hear the conversations. We don't work well together because we grow, we scale, we have change, uncertainty, whatever it is. So I say, okay, what behaviors do you need to see as a team? So when I talk with them, I don't tell them what behaviors they need to see because that's their culture, their space. So they need to tell me and they need to define that from themselves. And I ask them right now for 1 to 10, where are you with this behavior? And they need to define that. And how do we know there is progress? And every time we measure they measure themselves, and it will be individual measurement. But if I work with a team, it will also be a system because I can be wonderful as Noah, but when I show up in the system, I might not be at my best. So the team can show up differently together and have different behaviors than the way they show up as individuals. For example, there could be a team that is not good at giving feedback to each other. So when they measure each other, they say we're not good at it. But when they are measured as individual leaders, they get the grading that they are good at giving feedback to other people that outside the team. And those are the cool things that when you start working with systems of people, that we behave differently because of the culture, because of the leader, because of how we show up with each other. And that's very interesting. So there is some stuff that I say, hey, we can look at those things, but how and what will be meaningful for you as a team or individual to measure? I will not be the one that tell you what you should measure. So that's how I approach that as a partner rather than an arrogant consultant that know everything.
How long is your normal engagement? How long are you normally involved?
If it's teams, it probably will be around 6 to 12 months. If it's something that is more around communication skills, we see that a lot, especially in the middle level management, the managers, the directors, that they miss on communication skills and they need to build them. That will be around 4 to 6 months, depends. Sometimes it will also have one-on-one coaching, assessments, really depends on what the organization wants. But so between 4 to 12 months.
So every mandate's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Once you get in and see what's going on.
And really for me, from a tech conversation, if people know what it's an agile team. So for me, the aim is that they will become self-coached organizations or teams that they can do that without me, that I can remove myself and they can create systems the same way they create systems for change, I wish there were better organizations would do better work with change because it didn't really change. The theory is the same. It stayed the same since I started working with change.
Yeah.
But it's always messy. But I want to see them. So the same way they scale and they have everything for technology, can we do that also for the human side when we scale? So I wanted to have that system with the peer-to-peer that I can remove myself and just come for little interventions, and they can do that without me. That's my aim.
It makes way too much sense. It's too logical. How do people find you if they want to learn more about what you do and possibly reach out? How do we find you?
My first name is Noa, so it's Noa, no H there. So Noa, okay. My last name is Ronen. So LinkedIn, always love to chat with you. Follow me. Or my company name is Coaching Connection, not Connections, but connection.com.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Noa, thank you so much for joining today. I think we're in closely affiliated professions, and I completely agree with you on your concept of why peer-to-peer makes so much more sense than the trainer from the outside. So Thanks
Thank
again. I
you.
wish you the best of luck going forward.
Yeah, and grateful for having this conversation. Thank you for having me.
My
Cheers.
pleasure. Been chatting with Noa Ronen. Look her up. Lots to learn. This has been Gary Cinderbrand. You've been listening to If the Public Only Knew. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.